What's being shown now with chiral-induced spin selectivity is that you have to have had near perfect chirality at the start of life. It's not something that you could have evolved into. Dave in his video likes to just say, oh, he just blows it off. He says, this is something esoteric that Tour talks about. No, just because you can't answer it doesn't mean that it's esoteric. It is a real thing.
Hi, I'm Steve Meyer from Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture, and we have taken a particular interest in this spirited exchange that's been taking place on the internet between Dave Farina, also dubbed Professor Dave, and Professor James Tour of Rice University. Dr. Tour is one of the most distinguished scientists in the world, rated one of the top 50 scientists in the world. He has 600 peer-reviewed publications or more, and 150 some odd patents. He's a specialist in organic synthesis and nanotechnology.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons.
Professor Dave is an internet blogger who has a tremendous following online and has brought to the attention of many the controversy over the origin of life and what's called evolutionary abiogenesis.
Hey everyone, it's been quite some time since my two-part series demolishing every last one of James Tour's ridiculous talking points.
He's been a staunch critic of Dr. Tour and some of Dr. Tour's videos, and I wanted to just start, Jim, by asking you about this controversy, why you decided to weigh in the first place. Some might have seen it as a bit of a mismatch between a person of your eminence and an internet blogger. Why did you decide that this issue needed to be engaged in the way you've engaged it?
Well, I have nothing in particular against Dave Farina. I was just minding my own business, giving my own talks, and he came out with a video called Elucidating the Agenda of James Tour, as if I had some agenda behind speaking on abiogenesis. And my work is always just trying to expose the current work in abiogenesis and origin of life research, and I think do the work that reviewers should have done when those papers first came out, because I felt that actually that work screamed out that this could not be how life actually formed. And so when he came out with this video, every slide that he showed in the video was wrong. Every slide was wrong, and he has many viewers, and I thought, well, it'd be good to straighten this out, and so I came out with a 13-part series on abiogenesis, but I had to go through a lot of the background chemistry, and in doing that, I never called Dave Farina stupid. He says I called him stupid over and over again. I never called him stupid once. I never did. And I just talked about the science that was there, and I said that Dave was wrong. He was wrong on every point that he had made on that series. And so I just pointed that out.
Oh, yeah, sorry to interrupt. So you had a series of, I think, from what we've seen, very informative videos about the problems facing attempts to explain the origin of life from simpler non-living chemicals. And maybe we should actually start there just for our listeners and viewers. There are two branches of evolutionary theory. There's the chemical evolutionary theory, which attempts to explain how you get the first living cell from simpler non-living chemicals. And then there's biological evolution, which attempts to explain how you get new forms of life from simpler pre-existing forms. Your videos addressed only that first issue, the origin of the first life from simpler chemicals. And so anyway, you put that series out, and then Dave Farina came back with some more videos challenging you, but this time he cited a lot of experts in origin of life research, origin of life biochemistry, and I think that's given you a little bit more of an opening, I think, to have a scientific discussion at a high scientific level. I think you were probably not wanting to have to engage an internet blogger on these things, but due to the misinformation, I think you felt you had to. But now you're able to address some of the leading figures in the field, because those are the people he cited in his critique of you. Is that where we are in the discussion?
Right. So the good thing that Dave did is he brought on 3 experts to address the chemistry that I had talked about in my videos, and those 3 experts. And then he brought on 3, and then he cited several others, and so that's good, because now I can engage, particularly with those 3 that were presumably addressing my video. and I could go right after their science and talk about that.
Oh, and that's what we want to talk about. And I think, just again, as another preliminary, I would say that another good thing that Professor Dave has done in citing these experts in critique of your work is that I think it enables his viewers and our viewers to really assess the standing of these arguments that are being made in support of evolutionary abiogenesis. I had a supervisor in Cambridge when I was doing my PhD on origin of life biology, and he used to say, beware the sound of one hand clapping. If there's an argument on one side, there's bound to be an argument on the other. And you really can't assess, he said, the strength of an argument until you see how well it withstands criticism. And I think that applies to the to your critique of evolutionary abiogenesis, but also Professor Dave's critique and the experts he cites' critique of yours. So we have the arguments out there, and let's revisit them, and let's let our viewers hear your side of the story, and then people can begin to evaluate this for themselves as both sides of the story are increasingly out in public.
Abiogenesis is the origin of life from non-living matter. And to construct any convincing theory of abiogenesis, we must take into account the condition of the Earth about 4 billion years ago. These are not my definition. These are textbook dictionary definitions. All right?
You've given a lecture, and it's a very detailed lecture with a lot of science in it. And the expert on the other side of the question that you critique and cite is a man named Steve Benner. So we're going to get into some of his work and his claims. But maybe we could start with just a basic definition of life. I mean, because my supervisor used to say that behind every question about the origin of life lies another question, which is, what is it that we're trying to explain the origin of? Or as Alexander Oparin used to put it, one of the early chemical evolutionary theorists, the question of the origin of life and the nature of life are inextricably linked. We can't come up with a good origin of life theory unless we know what we're shooting for, what life is. So how do origin of life researchers and how do molecular biologists or cell biologists define life today?
Well, I think that defining life, as you know as a philosopher, is hard. Defining the characteristics of life is actually a much easier thing to do. And we know that all life as we know it is made out of cells, and you have a membrane on the outside, and you have DNA inside, and you have a lot of machinery going on in there, and you have to have 4 classes of chemicals. You have to have the amino acids, which are the building blocks of the proteins. You have to have carbohydrates or sugars, which are the building blocks of the polycarbohydrates or the polysaccharides. You have to have the lipids, which are the membrane, and then you have to have the nucleic acids, which are the DNA and the RNA. So you have to have those four classes of chemicals, and then you have to have a functioning system that has something called homeostasis, where there's this internal functioning and operation of the system. It is not just throwing a bunch of molecules inside a lipid. It is a whole functioning together. It is a system. It is a factory in a sense. These are the characteristics of life as we know it. And what some people are trying to do is they have said for years that they'll address this and they'll make this happen, and they've not been able to get close. So now they're trying to redefine what life is. Even the same people that have defined it the very same way that I have, these characteristics, are trying to now change the argument, which is, as you know, is a typical philosophical approach to do that.
Yeah. So they attempt to define life down to some simpler essence or some simpler combination of molecules and say, well, that's all we really need to explain. But the fact is that life with the characteristics that you described exists on this planet. And if we want to even get the biological evolution going, we've got to start with at least a functioning cell. So, and those cells have membranes, they have carbohydrates, they have proteins, they have nucleic acids, and they have intricate interactions. We've got an information storage transmission and processing system inside the cell. So that's what exists. We have to get to that point if we're really going to provide an explanation. I think that's been a great point that you've made. So let's discuss some of the general problems that origin of life simulation experiments have encountered as they've attempted to simulate the origin of those 4 classes of molecules. You have noticed that there's an awful lot of what's called in the field investigator interference. Can you describe some of the problems that have been encountered under that heading?
Well, certainly investigator interference means that investigators are doing all the work. And even with all the investigators doing all the work, with very intricate work, they have not been able to make any of the 4 classes of chemicals that are needed for life. Nobody has made the chiral lipids, the lipids that are needed where you have made the 2 enantiotopic hydroxyl groups of glycerol you've been able to distinguish those 2 enantiotopic groups. Nobody's ever been able to control any of the stereocenters there. Anything that anyone has made is not homochiral. And even what they've made is with, talking about interference, is with this deep hands-on chemistry using many, many steps that it's very hard for nature to use. And their syntheses are all cheated. They cheat at every step of their synthesis, meaning they'll mix A and B, they'll get a series of compounds. They only want one in that series, and they'll identify a little bit of it, a very small amount, in a machine, in an HPLC. But they won't take that and carry it on because it's too messy. It cannot be used. So they'll buy that fresh material from a manufacturer that isolates that from cellular sources, from something that has had life already, and then they'll take that on to the next step, and they repeat that over and over again. So every
Jim,
step
is
cheating.
Is that to prevent what are known as interfering cross reactions then in prebiotic synthesis? So you have a couple of reagents, you combine them, and then you get lots of byproducts. And if you and maybe one of them is something you want, but if you allow that to continue to react with all the other things that have been produced, you're going to end up with a sludge, or I think one of the products was called melanoidin in one of those reactions I remember studying. So you have to purify and remove those other byproducts, or else you just go and buy the one you want and start the next stage of the reaction all over again. Is that kind of what goes on? And
that's exactly what goes on. They put upon early Earth constraints that they themselves cannot even deal with. And with all their instruments, they will make it in such a mess that they themselves cannot even isolate it. But they leave this to early Earth. That's early Earth's problem, not my problem, they will say. Mm-hmm. They won't say that, but they'll infer that, and then they'll move on. So every step is a cheat. Every step screams out that this cannot be the way that early Earth did this synthesis. Cannot. Even with all their work, they have never made homochiral material.
Well, yeah, and let's talk about homochiral. What does that mean? I remember from chemistry, you've got amino acids come in left-handed and right-handed forms, and sugars come in left-handed and right-handed forms. Are all the 4 basic types of chemicals that are necessary for life, are they all chiral in the sense that they have 2 different types of forms or more?
Yes, every one of them. There's a couple of amino acids that don't have stereogenic centers, but everything else has a stereocenter. Actually, there's an amino acid that doesn't have it, but everything else, all classes of compounds have this. All amino acids, save one, all the carbohydrates, all the nucleotides have multiple stereocenters, not just one. And then the lipids have multiple stereocenters, and they've never controlled any of those in any synthesis that's prebiotically relevant.
Go ahead. I was going to say, what does that mean practically? Why do they need to be controlled? What's the
prebiotic
constraint?
relevance means that I cannot use these very sophisticated protection group schemes and catalysts that I've designed over a period of 150 years in modern chemistry, particularly in the last 50 years. We can control stereocenters now. We can do that sort of thing. We can separate these sorts of mixtures using our very sophisticated instruments. But when we say early Earth would never have that advantage, then we have to use only the chemistry that would be available on a prebiotic prebiotic earth. In other words, we're not using any of the sophisticated chiral-inducing agents that we have available to us today in our modern laboratory. That's what I mean, that a synthesis that has prebiotic relevance. They haven't even made ribose. If you can't make ribose, you can't make any of
a form of sugar, right?
It's a form of sugar. You can't make any of the RNA or the DNA. You're done. You're toast. That's it. And so what everybody starts with, they buy ribose. And the syntheses that they have of ribose, they don't even use themselves. If you use very, very sophisticated hands-on chemistry, like what John Sutherland has done, you can make ribose, but it is not homochiral, meaning that you have both mirror images of it.
And why is that a problem? Why is if you have both mirror images of the sugar or of the amino acids or any of the other fundamental molecules, why is it a problem to have both mirror image versions of those molecules?
Right. So if you don't have just the one mirror image rather than both of them, you cannot do the assemblies that you need to do to make the life type forms that you're going to need. And this is actually more recent work that's just come out in the last few years, work by Ron Naumann and some of his associates at the Weizmann Institute, that many people said, well, you had stereo mixtures, you had the R and the S, you had the left-handed, the right-handed, and then over time it evolved and it purified. Cannot be. And what he has shown, there's something called chiral-induced spin selectivity, meaning that if you didn't have this from the beginning, you could never have gotten this chemistry to work, because these act as what are called spin valves. The electrons have to go down particular chiral environments, and when you have the mixture of isomers, it cannot work. So you have to have had the chirality at the start. It's not something that could have been evolved into.
So you can't form a protein with a mixture of left and right-handed amino acids. You have to have exclusively left-handed amino acids, and there's an underlying physical reason for that is necessary to forming a functioning protein.